Sometimes you just kind of wonder, why was the church such an influential force in medieval Europe? But then you realize, when the entire state burns down around you, but the guys with the fancy clothes made it out as the only somewhat stable force, you kind of have to start thinking they were doing something right. At least that's what Carl over here thought. Real quick, this video might have some overlap with the previous one, because we did do some flashing forward here and there. So, we have seen how the Christians first displayed their art in remote sites like catacombs. But after being tolerated, and eventually adopted by the Roman Empire, Christianity carried on their propagandistic traditions. And under Constantine the Great, they also adopted the Roman public buildings known as basilicas as their archetypal houses of worship. One major problem with art history of the so-called Dark Ages is an issue that might sound familiar from the first video. A lot of it is gone. Any painting on wood can disappear because, wood can decay if not treated properly. And any wall painting will come down with the structure if it's demolished. Another problem is that we know relatively little details about this period, because it was a very turbulent time. A lot of wars, governmental shifts, and a lot of destruction. Although we shouldn't oversell the wholesale destruction. The general idea, thanks to the Renaissance writers, is that the Middle Ages was a period of decay. Decay in culture, knowledge, and art. The idea was that crazed religious fanatics would demolish any and all statues from antiquity because they depicted pagan gods and the like. But as we shall see, the post-Roman elite were actually really into Roman culture. A lot of Roman structures and works survived, but were given new functions. Like basilicas, this sarcophagus becoming a fountain, and some temples were even reappropriated as churches. Two famous examples are the Pantheon in Rome and Athenian Parthenon. Objects like statues remained standing for a very long time after the fall of Rome. Although there are still plenty of such instances when the clergy actually did have certain statues maimed or destroyed, either out of superstition that they would come to life, or out of fear that people would worship them as idols. But in many cases, especially with more remote ones, a lot of works survived. Another big factor in whether they were destroyed or not is what was depicted. If an object depicted a pagan god, it was in a more difficult position than when it depicted a triumphal general or emperor. One more important detail, sculpture that was freestanding was often in more danger than reliefs on buildings or huge monuments. See, the main reason sculptures were destroyed, and why remote works and reliefs more often survived, was that sculptures were mainly destroyed for practical rather than superstitious reasons. Most of the time, they faced demolishment in order to harvest their material components. For example, marble could be converted to lime for construction, and bronze could be melted down for its bronze. So, even though destruction of statues did take place, it is often overstated. So once more we see that there was no hard break with the Roman past after 476 as we often like to imagine. With this setup out of the way, what were some artistic trends in the early European Middle Ages? So after Rome did an oopsie and disappeared in the West, the church was the strongest and most stable institution to survive the chaos. But following the reign and reconquest of Emperor Justinian I, the Pope was under the control of the Byzantine Empire, or the Eastern Roman Empire. Pope Gregory the Great, who we met last episode when he laid down his funky rules, set the course for the rise of the Papal States as a secular power, in addition to their spiritual authority. During his reign, the Pope became one of Italy's biggest landowners. He organized Rome's defenses and created the means to fund an army. His prolific writings made many ecclesiastical aspects easily digestible and available for a larger audience. And as a bonus, Gregorian chants, which have been playing in the background, are named after him. But papal subjugation to the Byzantines was becoming more and more problematic, culminating in the crowning of Charlemagne as Emperor of Rome by Pope Leo III, something I am sure won't have any consequences. Anyway, last episode we delved into Big Greg's 3 rules for Christian art. 1. Art is a layman's book. 2. Art should inspire feelings of devotion. And 3. Art should help remember pious figures. So, as these rules suggest, art in the Christian world was also functional. They were meant to communicate messages to their viewer, like, "Look, the Old Testament predicted events in the New Testament," or "Live this piously." An example is this painting of the Annunciation, where Mary is surprised by the angel, yet she is composed and is not bewildered. One interpretation is that this might communicate that you should accept God's will. Another aspect of this communication is the use of attributes. which, along with common physical features, can help you identify the depicted figure. In the previous work, we saw a vase with lilies in the middle, which is the attribute of Mary. Let's quickly cover a few more examples. John the Evangelist is either depicted very old or very young. His attributes are an eagle, a chalice, and a scroll or book. And with the other three evangelists, it's a winged lion for Mark, an angel or winged man for Matthew, and a winged bull for Luke. The Christian Rapunzel, Saint Barbara, is recognized by her tower. Speaking of holding buildings, if you've ever wondered why some figures hold buildings, it's to signify that they were patrons for this building. An important art form during the Middle Ages was manuscript illumination. Manuscripts were adorned with stunning decorations. Both the writing and the artworks were painstakingly done by hand and cost a fortune. Many carried details rooted in local traditions. For example, Islamic manuscripts, which contain beautiful patterns and calligraphy. Or for example, manuscripts from the British Isles in the insular style, which contain dazzling Celtic nods. And on the mainland we also see themes from antiquity reappearing, like this Saint Mark posing as Virgil. Wait, hold on. Why did German and French manuscripts recall works from Roman antiquity? Once Western Rome was gone, there were various Germanic states left in his wake. One of them was the Frankish kingdom. And in the second half of the 8th century, its king was Carolus Magnus, aka Charlemagne, aka Charles the Great, aka Karl the Big. Karl looked at his kingdom, then at the Roman Empire of the past, then back at his kingdom, and thought, I want to be like them. So he conquered North Italy, got himself crowned Roman Emperor, he brutally conquered the pagans of Saxony, went to Spain, and at the end of his reign, the Frankish Empire looked like this. In this territory, Charlemagne tried to rebuild Rome. As part of his Renovatio Imperii, he learned Latin, promoted monastic orders like the Benedictines to produce administrators, and gave the medieval era a cultural boost known as the Carolingian Renaissance, which also affected art and architecture. An important product of this Renaissance were the aforementioned manuscripts, which were mostly produced by monks in monasteries. Among those was a neat biography of the emperor. All of this is kind of funny, because Karl himself might have never learned how to write. Another product of this Carolingian Renaissance was Carolingian architecture, which together with Ottonian architecture is known as pre- or early Romanesque. As you might have guessed, the origin of the term Romanesque comes from the mimicking of the Romans. They were Roman-esque in style. You can see this in the Palatine Chapel of the Aachen Cathedral. The central part of this cathedral is one of the last remnants of Charlemagne's original palace in the city. You can see that its floor plan resembles the San Vitale in Ravenna, which was built by the Byzantines and were called Roman martyria. You can also see it reflected in its stunning decoration. Structures like these were pimped up by spolia taken from conquered places like Italy. Spolia are elements taken from, sometimes looted from, buildings or monuments and then repurposed. An example is the Arch of Constantine. As you can see, this arch was made up of elements from various other monuments. But when it comes to the Palatine Chapel, these columns and, possibly, the steps of Charlemagne's throne are good examples of this. And this lifting of Roman motifs can also be seen in the aforementioned manuscripts with Saint Mark. So we saw Charlemagne become the one and only emperor. But wait, one and only? See, the East still had their own emperor, or well, empress at the time. But 250 years before Karl was born, another man had the idea of rebuilding Rome. This man was the aforementioned Eastern Emperor Justinian I. He got pretty close, thanks to help from his wife and certified girl boss, Empress Theodora, and his general and certified boy boss, Belisarius. But in the end he just exhausted his empire's resources on conquests he didn't even hold on to for very long. But as we've seen, for the time being the Pope was back in imperial fold. But with disintegrating imperial authority in Italy, the Pope got into a grey area. Following Big Greg, this subjugation became strained, and under Pope Sergius I in 692, it further broke down when he refused to follow new imperial theological rules. And the true crack came when Pope Leo III crowned Karl as the Emperor of Rome in 800. But when it comes to art in the East, after Christianity became the official religion of Rome, they went looking for a more permanent medium to adorn their religious buildings. They found this medium in mosaics. We've seen how the Romans were already familiar with these in the first video, but they mostly used it on floors and straight walls, as their concrete was not strong enough yet for hanging artworks. But by the 3rd century, some developments allowed for these types of mosaics. And by replacing stones with glass, they were lighter as well, allowing for such beautiful mosaics. Due to limitations in the medium, the works remained rather simplistic and only showed the most essential aspects. And such mosaics portraying Christ as the ruler of the universe became the most iconic products of Byzantine art. So while this was going on, what was the West doing? It's not like there was nothing happening in the Western world of art and architecture between Romulus Augustus' dethroning and the crowning of Charlemagne. The main cultural driving force during the so-called Dark Ages were the monastic orders. The most significant of these orders were the Benedictines, which we can attribute in part due to Karl's patronage of this monastic order. Monastic orders follow the rules laid down by their founders. The 2 central rules of the Rules of Saint Benedict requires monks to spend most of their day in prayer or performing labor. These 2 key rules became a standard for Western monasticism. There were many more monastic orders founded throughout history. One important one were the Cistercians, founded in the late 11th century. They followed uniform construction rules, which placed great emphasis on austerity. The Cistercians themselves also lived a Spartan lifestyle. They had no personal belongings, their decorations were plain and simple, and they slept on straw beddings in common rooms. After the fall of Rome, it were the monks who kept traditions like writing and the Christian faith alive. Monks lived in monasteries, which were often founded on specific sites. For example, they could be founded on remote sites, like a mountain. Or the location could be linked to the labor the monastery intended to fulfill. We have seen the importance of monasteries providing certain labor for rulers, like manuscript production. For example, here in the Netherlands, many land reclamation projects were spearheaded by monasteries. So back to the Franks. Charlemagne's grandsons kind of bungled his new Rome. See, Karl only had one surviving legitimate son, Louis the Pious. But thanks to Frankish inheritance laws, Louis's sons each got a piece of the empire when he died. This split became permanent and gave way for the predecessors of the modern-day countries of France and Germany. But in the 960s, a new dynasty in Eastern Francia gave it a shot, the Ottonians. Though their realm was slightly smaller, it still contained many modern-day countries. The Ottonian dynasty mirrored the Carolingians in that they also tried to renovatio that imperii. They also had their own Ottonian Renaissance. For example, they built many iconic German churches. But most of their buildings have been damaged or remodeled, but some have also been rebuilt according to drawings of the originals. Before continuing, there is something I quickly want to address. I named this part of the video pre/early Romanesque. But there's something about styles that I have already alluded to. We as human beings often want to categorize everything, but many things defy easy categorization. If you went back in time to ask about the Gothic influences to the Notre Dame, you would get a funny look. The idea of pre-Romanesque, Romanesque and Gothic for example are all later inventions. So keep in mind, it's not like such stylistic innovations just happen from one day to the next. There are often slow developments and constructions or artworks that combine what we typically assign to one style or another. And like I said, most styles are modern categorizations. With that out of the way, when we talk about pre-Romanesque, we mean artworks and constructions from the Merovingian, Carolingian and Ottonian dynasties. Anyway, in their buildings and artworks, we can see the Ottonians try to link themselves to the Roman emperors and the empire as a whole, just like Karl did. For one, we see churches built to resemble the scale and layout of early basilicas, like St. Michael's Church in Hildesheim. Its patron, Bernward, who we also talked about last video when discussing the doors of Hildesheim Cathedral, was likely a great admirer of the Roman Emperor Trajan, as he also created the Bernward column. This bronze column mirrors the giant one of Trajan in Rome, but instead of the Dacian Wars, it depicts events from the life of Christ. And those doors of his were also likely a reference to the doors of Roman temples. The Ottonians would continue to sponsor the construction of many churches and castles throughout the empire, which would slowly but surely provide the impetus for the birth of the Romanesque style. So, during this video, we've seen how rulers tried to link themselves to the Romans, a tradition that will be kept alive for a long time. Next video in the series will deal with pilgrimages and their effects on the history of art and architecture, as we see the rise of Romanesque and Gothic. But for now, if you enjoyed this video and it lets you all renovatio'd out, then don't forget to leave a like, comment and press the subscribe button. And if you want to be notified when the next video is uploaded, then don't forget to click the bell icon. Have a good one and see y'all next time.